Welcome to a chilling and thrilling ghost story set in an old apartment in the heart of New York City, where unsolved mysteries continue to haunt anyone who dares to step inside. This story is not just about a house, it's about a dark curse that no one can escape. At 57 West Street, there is an attic apartment where a strange death occurred, triggering a series of unexplained and eerie events. Supernatural phenomena, restless spirits that cannot find peace, and souls lingering in the shadows, waiting for new victims. From newlywed couples to brave investors, everyone faces the same question. Can anyone escape the haunting of this apartment? Prepare yourself to step into a world of terror, where souls never rest, and the curse of apartment 57 West will never let go. This story will keep you glued to every detail, and perhaps you'll find yourself wondering if you would have the courage to step into that place. We wish you a frightening and suspenseful journey through the story of the haunted apartment at 57 West Street. As nightfall descended, New York, with its bright neon lights and the constant hum of traffic, kept hidden within it mysteries that few dared to explore. And in the heart of the city, at 57 West Street, stood an old building, seemingly innocent, yet harboring a dark secret that no one would dare uncover. The attic apartment in this building was not remarkable. Its aged, creaky walls and closed windows made it seem like just another forgotten corner of the city. But little did anyone know, before anyone moved in, this very apartment had witnessed a strange death that sparked a series of unexplainable events. One rainy night, in the small room at the top of the building, a middle-aged man named Gregory made a tragic decision to end his life. But this wasn't an accident or illness. With despair consuming him, he chose to jump from the apartment's window, falling to his death from several stories high. The people who lived around that apartment recall a chilling night when, at the peak of a storm, the entire neighborhood fell silent. At that very moment, a shadowy figure appeared at the window of the attic apartment. The window creaked open, and a gust of cold wind rushed in. But no one could see the man standing there. There was only the sound of a deep, sorrowful sigh emanating from within the apartment. Within moments, a loud crash shattered the silence of the night. People rushed to the scene, but all they found was Gregory's lifeless body lying on the ground, his face still frozen in a twisted expression of fear and pain. His wide, terror-stricken eyes seemed to look into something unseen, something unimaginable. Gregory's death left behind not just a haunting question, why did he do it? But also a terrifying legacy that would echo through the building for years. From that moment on, the attic apartment at 57 West Street ceased to be just another place to live. It became a symbol of eerie, supernatural occurrences, a mark of a death so tragic that no one could ever explain, but everyone could feel. After Gregory's mysterious death, the apartment at 57 West Street was no longer just a regular place to live. Each night, when darkness fell and the lights of the city shimmered through the mist, the apartment became a source of terror for anyone who dared to live there. The residents of the building began to share stories of the strange occurrences, each one more terrifying than the last. The first new tenants to move in were a young family, excited about the spacious apartment and the affordable rent. They thought it would be the perfect place to start their new life together. But on their very first night, they quickly realized they had made a grave mistake. The apartment was eerily quiet, the silence was so heavy that it felt suffocating. Strange sounds began to fill the air, faint knocks, the creaking of floorboards, and soft, echoing footsteps, as if someone was walking through the apartment, even though no one was there. The family dismissed it as the old building settling, but the next morning they discovered that the furniture had moved. Chairs were out of place, the rug was rolled up, and objects were scattered around as if someone had been searching through the apartment in the dead of night. It didn't stop there. As the nights went on, the strange events grew more intense. The father, John, started hearing whispers in the dark, barely audible, yet unmistakable. "Get out. Leave this place. Now." But whenever he tried to find the source, there was only silence. The whole family could feel a strange presence following them, always lurking just out of sight, as if they were being watched. One night, while Emily, John's wife, was in the kitchen preparing dinner, the temperature in the room suddenly dropped. The air turned cold, and she could see her breath in the air. Then, without warning, the kitchen lights flickered and went out completely. As she fumbled for the light switch, a faint, cold breeze brushed against her skin. Emily turned around to find a shadowy figure standing in the doorway, staring at her. Her heart raced, and as she tried to scream, the figure disappeared, leaving her frozen in terror. The family tried to dismiss these occurrences as figments of their imagination, but then, one night, they heard a sound they couldn't ignore. A loud crash echoed through the apartment, followed by what sounded like someone running through the halls. John rushed out of his bedroom to investigate, but again, he found nothing. No signs of any disturbance, no intruder. The apartment was as empty as ever, but the fear had begun to take root, and they couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was waiting for them in the shadows. The final straw came when the clocks in the apartment all stopped at exactly 3 a.m. No matter how many times they reset them, the time would always freeze at the same hour. It was as if the apartment itself was mocking them, telling them they were trapped in some kind of eternal nightmare. Desperate, John and Emily contacted a local priest, hoping he could cleanse the apartment of its evil. But when the priest arrived and entered the apartment, he immediately felt the weight of the malevolent energy that clung to the place. The priest whispered a prayer, but as he spoke, the lights flickered again, and a cold wind swept through the room. The priest's voice trembled as he told them that the apartment was cursed, that the spirits of those who had died there were trapped, unable to move on. And worst of all, he warned them that the curse would never release its hold. It wasn't long before John and Emily packed up their things and left the apartment, never to return. But the apartment at 57 West Street had claimed yet another victim. The story of its dark past spread through the neighborhood, and soon no one dared live in the building again. The curse of Gregory's death had become a legend, and the apartment was left to rot in silence, awaiting its next unfortunate tenant. The curse of Gregory's death had become a legend, and the apartment was left to rot in silence, awaiting its next unfortunate tenant. The curse of Gregory's death had become a legend, and the apartment was left to rot in silence. When a new family moved into the apartment at 57 West Street, they had no idea they were walking into a nightmare. The family, John and Emily, had just relocated to New York, excited about their new life and the affordable rent. The apartment was spacious, and at first glance, it seemed like the perfect place to settle down. But they couldn't have been more wrong. On their very first night, the atmosphere of the apartment began to feel strangely oppressive. The silence was thick, almost suffocating, and the stillness was broken only by the occasional creak of the old building. At first, they shrugged it off as the sounds of an old structure settling. But as the days passed, the occurrences became harder to ignore. John was the first to notice something was off. One evening, while he was sitting in the living room, he heard faint whispers, almost like someone was talking in the next room. He stood up and cautiously approached the source of the sound. But when he opened the door, no one was there. The apartment was empty, yet the whispers continued. The sound seemed to echo through the walls, sending a chill down his spine. Emily, too, began to feel the unsettling presence. One night, while she was making dinner in the kitchen, she felt the temperature drop suddenly. A cold breeze swept through the room, and she could see her breath in the air. The lights flickered, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to darken. As she reached for the light switch, she heard a faint laugh, soft and distant, but unmistakable. It sent a wave of panic through her. She quickly turned the lights back on, but when she glanced around the room, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Yet, the air was thick with an eerie feeling, as if something was watching her. The strangest and most frightening event occurred one night when John and Emily were sleeping. In the dead of night, both of them were awakened by a loud, sudden crash. It came from the hallway. Terrified, they rushed out of their bedroom, but when they checked the source of the noise, they found nothing. The hallway was empty. The apartment was undisturbed. No sign of anything falling or being knocked over. But the fear lingered, heavy in the air. The following nights were filled with strange sounds, footsteps when no one was walking, doors creaking open by themselves, and the sensation that they were never truly alone. The unease in the apartment grew, and the couple could not shake the feeling that they were being watched, followed by something unseen. It all reached its peak one night when Emily, alone in the apartment, heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind her. She turned around quickly, but there was no one there. The sound continued, growing louder, as though something was moving through the apartment, right behind her. Her heart raced and panic set in. She ran to John's side, her voice trembling as she described what had happened. But when John checked, the apartment was once again eerily quiet, as though nothing had occurred. The final straw came one morning when they discovered that all of the clocks in the apartment had stopped at exactly 3 a.m. No matter how many times they tried to reset them, they would always freeze at that same hour. It was as if the apartment itself was mocking them, reminding them that they were trapped in a cycle they couldn't escape.
In a final act of desperation, John and Emily called in a priest to bless the apartment. The priest arrived with a sense of foreboding, knowing the building's dark history. As he entered the apartment, he immediately felt the heavy, oppressive presence of something malevolent. He performed a prayer, but as he spoke, the lights began to flicker and a cold wind swept through the room. The priest looked at John and Emily, his face pale with fear, and whispered, "This place is cursed. The spirits that haunt this apartment are restless. They will never leave." Terrified and unable to shake the fear that had settled deep in their hearts, John and Emily packed their bags and left the apartment, never to return. But the curse of 57 West Street was far from over. It would claim more souls in the years to come, as no one who dared to live there could ever escape its grip. The apartment remained, its dark legend continuing to spread. The building stood as a silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded within its walls. The stories of its haunting would remain, a chilling reminder of the evil that still lingered there, waiting for the next victims to enter its doors. After John and Emily moved out, 57 West Street remained abandoned for several months. However, the apartment did not stay empty for long. Despite the warnings and the unsettling reputation of the place, a new man named Richard, a real estate investor, decided to take a chance on the building. He had heard rumors about its dark past, but rather than feeling fear, he saw it as a challenge. Richard was not one to easily succumb to superstition, and he believed the stories were just that, stories. The first few days in the apartment were uneventful. Richard found the space to be old but charming. He started making improvements and repairs, hoping to renovate and rent it out for a profit. But as night fell, a sense of dread began to creep in. On the first night, Richard was in the living room when he heard footsteps echoing from the hallway. At first, he thought it was just the building settling, but the sound grew louder, almost as if someone was walking behind him. He quickly turned around, but there was no one there. His heart raced, and he attributed it to his imagination, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Things only got worse as the days passed. Richard started experiencing strange occurrences, objects shifting on their own, doors opening and closing without explanation, and the lights flickering at random. He began to hear whispers at night, soft, indistinct voices that seemed to come from the walls themselves. But every time he investigated, there was nothing. The apartment, still and silent, only deepened his sense of unease. One evening, Richard was sitting in his living room when the lights suddenly went out. The apartment was plunged into darkness, and the temperature dropped sharply. He could see his breath in the cold air. As he fumbled for a flashlight, he heard a soft voice calling his name. Richard. The voice was chilling, barely a whisper, but unmistakable. Terrified, Richard grabbed the flashlight and shone it around the room. For a moment, there was nothing. But then, from the corner of his eye, he saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was faint, almost translucent, but unmistakably human. The figure was motionless, staring at him with hollow, empty eyes. Richard's heart pounded in his chest, and he could barely breathe. The figure vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving only a cold, lingering fear. Unable to ignore what was happening any longer, Richard began researching the apartment's history. What he discovered only deepened his terror. The apartment had been the site of many deaths over the years. Deaths that could never be explained. People had come and gone, but all had left in fear, some even abandoning their belongings, leaving without a trace. Gregory's death was only the most recent in a long line of mysterious fatalities that had occurred in the building. It was clear to Richard that the apartment was not just haunted, it was cursed. The spirits of those who had died there were trapped, unable to move on. And worst of all, the curse seemed to feed on the souls of those who dared to live there, drawing them in and slowly driving them to madness or death. One night, Richard could no longer take it. He stood in the apartment, looking around at the dark corners where shadows seemed to shift. The whispers grew louder, and the temperature dropped again. He could feel the presence of the spirits around him, watching, waiting. The apartment was alive with a sinister energy, and Richard knew that he would never escape it. As the clock struck midnight, he realized there was no way out. The apartment had already claimed him. The curse had worked its way into his soul, and he was now another lost spirit trapped within its walls. The last thing he heard was a voice, low, cold, and filled with malice, whispering in his ear, "You can never leave." No one ever saw Richard again. The apartment remained, its curse continuing to claim victim after victim. People whispered of the haunted apartment at 57 West Street, but no one dared go near it. The building stood as a dark reminder of the evil that lingered there, an eternal curse that no one could escape.